Welcome Beyond the Text by 6-7. Today we are plunging into the heart of, well, what you could call one of history's most profound spiritual revolutions. We're tracing the epic journey of Prince Siddhartha, the man who became the Buddha, and we're using Sir Edwin Arnold's magnificent poem, The Light of Asia, as our guide. Our mission is simple but deep, to understand how in a world just saturated with divas, creator gods, and millennia of ritual sacrifice, one figure dared to suggest that ultimate salvation lay not in a divine being, but in an impersonal, moral, self-regulating law. We're looking for that precise moment of rationalist critique, that philosophical leap that challenged the very concept of an omnipotent, benevolent God. How did we get from supplication to radical self-mastery?
That tension you just mentioned, that's really the engine of this whole deep dive. The sources paint this picture of a universe where, every single phenomenon, from storms to harvest, is governed by a hierarchy of personal gods. You've got the divas, the regents, and then sort of above it all, this ultimate abstract supreme power, Brahm. And Siddhartha's story isn't just a biography. It's basically the birth certificate of a philosophy that looks at that established cosmic order, finds it totally wanting in the face of suffering, and then concludes that true freedom. It requires finding a power that is, and this is the key, past all gods.
Past all gods. Okay, so let's unpack this journey, because the opening books of The Light of Asia are anything but skeptical. The foundation of the story is absolutely drenched in traditional theology and divine wonder.
It has to be.
We have to understand the scale of what he rejects.
Precisely. To truly grasp the magnitude of Siddhartha's later rejection, his philosophical atheism, if you want to call it that, we first have to appreciate the world he was born into. The source material establishes this overwhelmingly polytheistic spiritual context.
It's not subtle.
Not at all. This is a universe ruled by regents of the elements, minor devas, powerful Brahmins, and it's all governed by ritual and sacrifice. The universe itself wants Siddhartha. It's waiting for him.
And the text makes it so clear that this isn't just a local affair. The anticipation surrounding his birth is celestial, it's cosmic. We're told that Lord Buddha, having already attained wisdom in past lives, waited in a high sphere. And the devas knew the signs of his imminent arrival, stating explicitly that he would go again to help the world. It's framed as this deliberate, compassionate descent.
And the signs are meant to be indisputable proof of his destiny. Queen Maya's dream, which is described in Book 1, is the central portent here.
Right, the elephant.
The elephant. She sees a star, six-rayed, colored rosy pearl, which then transforms into this magnificent six-tusked white elephant. And this elephant enters her womb upon the right.
What's the symbolism there? A six-tusked elephant is pretty specific.
It's all about connecting his arrival to ancient wisdom, to purity, and to this idea of universal power. It's a sign that he's not just another king or another prophet. He is something unique.
And the reaction to this dream is, as you said, cosmic. The text says the strong hills shook, the waves sank, all the flowers bloomed out of season.
And crucially, a whisper pierced even the farthest, deepest hells, proclaiming, Buddha is come.
Which is just an incredible image.
It is. The poet's intention here is to establish absolute theological certainty. That whisper offers hope even in the lowest, most suffering regions. It says, uprise and hear and hope. Buddha is come.
So even before he's born, he's already a universal savior figure.
Yes, and his birth is painless. It's marked by 32 sacred primal signs, and it's attended by the highest beings in the cosmos.
The attendance detail is fascinating. When they carry his palanquin, the text says the bearers are invisibly the four regents of the earth who've come down from Mount Sumeru.
Yeah, the celestial generals.
The celestial generals.
Yeah.
The angel of the east in silver, south in blue, west in blood red, and north in gold. What is that specific image of the world's elemental rulers carrying him? Tell us about his initial status in this divine hierarchy.
It tells us he is recognized and served by the entire existing divine structure. The poem notes that gods walked free with men that day, though men knew not.
So the gods are there, hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. This means that the whole established cosmic order, the entire framework of theistic authority, is bowing to him from the moment of his birth. It sets the stakes incredibly high. He's basically given the keys to the kingdom of the gods.
And his later act is to hand them back and say, thanks, but no thanks. I found a better path.
Precisely.
Meanwhile, the king, his father, Suddhodana, is just deeply worried. He gets these prophecies that offer two paths for his son.
The two paths. The Grey Dream readers predicted he would be either a Chakravartin, which is a supreme world ruler with 7 divine gifts.
Like a divine discus and a cloud-trumping horse, all this amazing stuff.
All this amazing stuff, yeah. Or a holy child of wondrous wisdom who shall deliver men from ignorance.
And the king wants the first one. Badly.
Of course he does. He's a man of power. He fears the spiritual path. He wants the political one. But the final authentication of Siddhartha's spiritual destiny comes with the visit of Asita, the gray-haired saint.
Asita hears the devas singing at the birth. And when he sees the baby, he just immediately recognizes the 32 sacred signs and cries, "Thou art Buddha."
He knows instantly. But what's so powerful about that scene is that even amidst this divine joy, there's this layer of existential sorrow.
Right, because Asita weeps.
He weeps. He weeps because he knows the boy is Buddha and will teach the law. But he himself is dying too soon and will never get to hear that saving doctrine.
It's a really powerful, dramatic device. It shows that even those who are closest to the divine light, they're still subject to the iron rule of death and time.
And that reinforces this theme of universal impermanence that runs through the whole poem. Even Queen Maya, 7 days later, is deemed too sacred for more woe, and she dies painlessly, passing to a heaven where the devas worship her.
So even the mother of the Buddha
Is subject to the cycle of change. Her passing, though it's peaceful, shows that. So the initial framing is overwhelmingly theistic, yes, but it subtly introduces the first cracks in that system. The divine world itself is subject to sorrow and impermanence.
So if the sources are setting up the highest possible theistic destiny for him, then Siddhartha's eventual rejection becomes the ultimate philosophical act. It's not just rejecting a belief system, it's rejecting his own divine birthright.
Absolutely. And the king's response to this terrifying prophecy is to try and suppress that spiritual destiny through total environmental control.
The royal cage.
His royal cage. He had built the 3 stately houses, Suha, Sarama, Rama I, for each season, and he surrounded them with every conceivable delight. This was an attempt to literally engineer reality.
He commanded that the prince never see death or age, sorrow or pain or sickness. This wasn't just shielding, it was an act of radical censorship.
It was. Dying roses were plucked, and anyone who even looked sad or sick was immediately exiled. The whole goal was to manufacture a perfect simulation of earthly permanence.
But even in this luxurious prison, we see these signs that Siddhartha's consciousness is already operating on a different universal level. His education with the sage Viswamitra proves this almost immediately.
It does. The prince's wisdom just transcends mere localized scripture.
What stands out to me in the source is the detail about the scripts. When Viswamitra asks him to write the sacred Gayatri verse, Siddhartha doesn't just write it in the local tongue.
No, he draws it instantly in dozens of scripts. Nagari, Dakshin, the language of the Magians, the speech of signs, and the tokens of the sea peoples.
What is the poem trying to tell us with that?
It's a narrative way of saying he possesses innate, universal knowledge that actually preceded human language or any specific divine revelation. His understanding isn't based on being taught a localized truth from one set of holy books. He already knows the universal system.
And the numeration part further confirms this. When they move on to counting, Siddhartha recites the Hindu numeration far past common understanding. He lists numbers used to count stars and ocean drops.
And he ultimately reaches the Mahakalpas,
Which are
the immense cyclical timescales used by the highest gods themselves. This is a critical detail for our analysis. The Mahakalpas are the scale by which the gods compute their future and their past.
So if he knows this scale instantly,
It means he understands the fundamental mathematical architecture of reality, which includes the finite, measurable existence of the devas themselves. The gods live for vast amounts of time, but that time is still measurable, and therefore it's finite and temporary. This innate knowledge preempts his later realization that the gods can't be the ultimate solution.
his teacher, Viswamitra, is right to prostrate himself and cry, "Art teacher of thy teachers." Siddhartha knows all this without the books.
Which establishes his authority to eventually critique the books and the divine entities they celebrate.
Okay, so before the big philosophical critique solidifies, his guiding principle, compassion, is established, and it comes through the famous swan incident.
Yes. His cousin Devadatta shoots a swan. Siddhartha retrieves the bird, gently heals it, and this leads to a profound moral debate that really sets the stage for the law he will eventually teach.
The debate centers on ownership, right? Devadatta claims the swan by right of conquest, the right of the slayer.
And Siddhartha's counter-argument is just beautiful. He claims ownership by right of mercy and loves lordliness, arguing that the savior of a life owns more than the slayer.
It's a brilliant, simple ethical
It
equation.
is. And what's fascinating here is the poet's choice for the judge. The judgment is upheld not by the king, but by some unknown priest who pronounces Siddhartha's argument supreme and then just vanishes.
Which implies divine sanction.
It implies a divine sanction for the moral law of compassion, placing it hierarchically above the physical law of conquest and possession. Moral truth holds precedence over human law. It's a foretaste of Dharma.
Then comes the first real crack in the beautiful simulation the king built. The site of universal suffering during the plowing festival.
The king takes Siddhartha to see the fruitful earth, hoping to immerse him in the joy of earthly labor and plenty.
A bit of propaganda.
A bit of propaganda, exactly. But Siddhartha looks deeper than the surface joy. While the king sees bounty and peace, Siddhartha sees the grim conspiracy of mutual murder.
Mutual murder. He sees the lizard eating the ant, the snake eating the lizard, the kite eating both. He sees life living upon death.
The observation is truly horrifying. The poem calls it the rage to live which makes all living strife. It's not just physical death, but the psychological suffering that is inherent in the struggle for existence itself.
And he's just overwhelmed by this vast pity and wide love, and he sits under the jambu tree.
And in this moment of pure empathy, not theological study, not ritual, but profound compassion, his spirit achieves dhyana, the first step on the contemplative path. High spirits, rishis, they descend to worship him.
So this early event confirms a crucial point for you, the listener. Siddhartha's spiritual quest is driven entirely by the unbearable reality of suffering. It's a problem that the existing theologies, centered on joy and ritual, have utterly failed to address.
Exactly. He is not seeking God. He's seeking an answer to pain. And that sorrow remains, even as the king forces his marriage to Yasodhara. The prison is becoming unbearable.
So the king's engineered reality, it can't hold the weight of this universal philosophical void he's feeling. Despite his bliss, Siddhartha is troubled.
He is. And the sources hint at a kind of supernatural intervention that aids his departure. The wind plays a gourd, and through it the devas themselves sing a mockery of mortal life.
Which is a beautiful piece of narrative irony, isn't it? The devas, who are supposedly the guardians of the existing order, they're the ones singing this harsh truth.
Lo, as the wind is so is mortal life, a moan, a sigh, a sob, a storm, a strife. They call the life he clings to an empty show, and they directly summon him. Rise, Maya's child, wake, slumber not again.
They're essentially pushing him out the door.
They are. They're telling him what you are seeking here is temporary and futile. You have to move to the larger impersonal truth. His existential ache is so great, he tells Yasodhara that his pain is something her soft lips cannot kiss away. He senses a reality beyond the curated gardens.
The king, still desperate, orders the city purged, attempting to remove all evil sights. He's trying to edit reality before his son sees it. But fate, or maybe the universe itself, intervenes. Siddhartha takes 3 trips and encounters the 4 dreaded sights.
The old man is the first blow. It represents the power of time. He sees a wretch in rags, bent, haggard, crying, "Alms, for I die tomorrow or the next day."
And the sudden, horrifying realization is that this fate, the destruction of beauty, of love, of strength, it comes to all men. It will come to his beautiful wife and to himself, and that just shatters the illusion of permanence.
Completely. He returns home immediately, sleepless, darkened by the dread of time's absolute power.
The second trip presents the sick man, the fragility of the physical body. A man writhing with a deadly plague spotted with purple blotches. Sickness, he learns, befall all flesh and enter everywhere.
This destroys the illusion of safety. I mean, if you can be healthy and beautiful one day and then writhing in agony the next, then nothing is truly secure. Life is structurally flawed because it's built on these temporary constructs of health and youth.
Which leads straight to the third most brutal reality, the dead man. A stiff, lean, grinning body carried on a bamboo bier to the pyre. Chenna confirms the universal destiny. This is the end that comes to all who live. The body that was the lamp unto the life is utterly consumed by fire.
It is the final nail in the coffin of the king's manufactured reality. The cycle is relentless. Pleasure, aging, sickness, and inevitable death. And this profound realization forces the central philosophical crisis of the entire narrative.
And here's the moment we've been building toward, the moment Siddhartha stops just lamenting suffering and starts challenging the very architecture of the divine world that supposedly rules over it. He's overwhelmed by the agony of earth, and he pivots from pity to philosophical critique.
Yes, this is the radical rationalist pivot, the direct challenge to the ruling theology of Brahm. He looks from earth to the sky, and he asks the question that underpins all subsequent non-theistic philosophy. Let's hear that quote again, because it's the core of this deep dive.
I am as all these men who cry upon their gods and are not heard or are not heeded, yet there must be aid. Perchance the gods have need of help themselves, being so feeble that when sad lips cry, they cannot save.
And then comes the core of it.
How can it be that Brahm would make a world and keep it miserable, since if all-powerful he leaves it so, he is not good, and if not powerful, he is not God? Chana, lead home again. It is enough, mine eyes have seen enough.
Let's just pause on that quote. If Brahm is either not good or not God, how did that statement fundamentally redefine what a supreme spiritual authority even means? It is astonishingly modern logic for a figure set in this ancient theistic context.
It's the ultimate statement of the problem of evil.
Delivered with perfect logical precision. He uses the suffering he just witnessed, the old man, the sick man, the dead man, as empirical evidence against the traditional concept of an omnipotent, benevolent creator.
If suffering is universal.
The creator cannot meet both criteria at the same time. He is logically inadequate.
So the implication is immediate. The established theological hierarchy, built around appeasing or praying to Brahm, is useless for ultimate salvation. They are crying out, and they are not being heard. The aid, therefore, must exist outside of that system.
And his whole goal shifts. It's no longer about earthly dominance or even supplicating the divine, but about finding that impersonal aid.
And this decision is then immediately reinforced by a prophetic dream the king has. A hermit interprets the king's 7 fears as 7 joys, confirming Siddhartha will fulfill his mission.
And crucially, the leading figures in that dream are identified as the 6 chief teachers his son will convince of their foolishness. This solidifies the idea that the existing wisdom, the established theistic and philosophical doctrines, are fundamentally flawed and awaiting his correction.
So the stage is set. The king's triple guard can't hold him. Siddhartha makes his final departure, the Great Renunciation, during the full moon. It is the necessary sacrifice, choosing the path of universal love over personal, earthly attachment.
And even in her sorrow, Yasodhara dreams of his success. She sees the white bull, who is Siddhartha, break free, and a new glorious banner replacing Indra's flag, bringing new words of joy.
So she's dreaming of the end of the old religious order, Indra being the king of the Devas.
Exactly, and the rise of the new Dharma. It's beautifully foreshadowed.
And when he departs, he justifies this painful personal sacrifice by directly referencing the theological failure he observed. He explicitly questions the effectiveness of prayer, of tithes, of charms, and sacrifice to Vishnu, Shiva, and Surya.
He asks the central question that ritualistic religion has to answer. Have any of my brothers escaped thereby? The aches of life, the stings of love and loss, the horrible dark death. I mean, if the rituals and prayers don't offer immunity from the fundamental problem of existence, which is suffering, then what good are they?
They're useless. And his conclusion about the gods themselves is scathing, but it's nuanced. He doesn't deny they exist, but he denies their utility for salvation.
Right. He says, nay, it may be some of the gods are good, and evil some, but all in action weak, both pitiful and pitiless, and both covery, as men are bound upon this wheel of change.
Bound upon this wheel of change.
That is the crucial point for you, the listener. The devas are temporary. They are higher beings, yes, but they are trapped on the same cycle of rebirth and impermanence as the lowest worm. If they are bound to the wheel of change, how can they possibly free humanity from it?
They can't.
They can't. They are not the solution. They are part of the problem.
But if these devas are temporary and bound, why does the source material spend so much time establishing their power? Is the narrative trying to trick the reader into feeling the magnitude of the system he's rejecting?
I think so. It ensures that his philosophy is seen not as a rejection of some weak local faith, but as a victory over the most powerful spiritual hierarchy of the time. He has to go beyond the gods, and to do that, we must first accept that the gods are real and powerful, but only within their own temporary sphere.
So Siddhartha begins his quest, taking up the yellow robe of a wandering rishi. His first stop is Rajagriha, where he encounters the contemporary practice of extreme asceticism, the yogis and brahmacharis.
And this is an important detour because he has to reject the idea that pain itself leads to freedom. He sees practitioners standing with their arms lifted until they wither, clenching their hands until nails pierce their palms, walking on spikes. Their goal is to break the accursed flesh which clogs the soul.
And his critique of this extremism is immediate and powerful.
Yes, he argues that trying to buy heaven with your blood in hell's hard market is completely futile because the toil will just begin again.
And why will it begin again?
Because even the rewards they seek, a higher temporary heaven, are subject to decay. When he asks the yogis about the permanence of their rewards, they admit the blissful joys they gain through suffering fade at length, and that even the gods do not endure forever.
So even the goal is temporary.
Their ultimate answer is, only great Brahm endures. The gods but live. Even Brahm, the most abstract entity, endures. But the other deities merely live, which implies that even the divine beings they're trying to reach are themselves finite and temporary.
So pursuing joy through pain is just exchanging one temporary state for another.
Exactly. He rejects torturing the body. He says the body isn't a foe, but a vessel to be maintained for the quest. Will ye, sad sirs, dismantle and dismember this fair house where we have come to dwell?
Which is the seed of the middle path. Balance, not extremism.
Right. And this philosophical rejection of painful self-sacrifice leads him directly to his rejection of ritualistic blood sacrifice.
The herdsman.
The herdsman. He encounters them driving flocks for the king's sacrifice. 100 goats, 100 sheep meant to worship the gods. And this ritualistic violence, supposedly commanded by these inadequate deities, must be dismantled next.
At the altar, he intervenes. He stops the knife. His speech is devastatingly rational. He speaks of life, which all can take but none can give, and he points out the profound hypocrisy of man who prays for mercy yet is merciless to the beasts.
And this is where he introduces the idea that completely replaces theistic grace, karma. He preaches that you cannot wash your spirit clean with blood, nor can you transfer your sin to an innocent animal. Sin is personal, and consequence is universal.
We have to pause and define karma exactly as the source does, because it's the non-theistic linchpin of this whole philosophy.
It is. It is the fixed arithmetic of the universe, which meteth good for good and ill for ill, measure for measure unto deeds, words, thoughts, watchful, aware, implacable, unmoved.
That mathematical language is key. Fixed arithmetic. It's an objective accounting system. There is no God to forgive, no divine grace to intercede, only an objective consequence. You reap what you sow.
And the equal retribution must be made, though de-arbitrary long. This reframes morality entirely. Moral law is an inherent function of the universe, not a personal command issued by a deity whose moods might change.
If you do good, the system generates benefits. If you do evil, it generates consequences. The power is in the law itself.
Yes, and this moral victory has immediate real-world consequences. The king, Bimbisara, and the priests are convinced. They scatter their altar flames, and a decree is proclaimed. Henceforth, none shall spill the blood of life or taste of flesh.
A literal legislative rejection of transactional theology.
Absolute.
So after 6 years of this hard quest rejecting both opulence and extremism, Siddhartha is physically frail. And this weakness, ironically, leads him to the crucial discovery of the middle path.
It does. The discovery is serendipitous and deeply metaphorical. He's sitting there, weak and hungry, and he hears a Nautch girl singing, and she accidentally provides the perfect analogy for balance.
The string or stretched breaks, and the music flies. The string or slack is dumb, and music dies. Tune us the sitar neither low nor high.
And the analogy just strikes him instantly. He realizes he has strained the string of life way too much with his asceticism. The simple yet profound lesson is that balance is the only way to achieve perfect harmony or perfect truth.
His physical restoration comes from accepting a simple meal of curds and milk from Sujata, who, ironically, mistook the emaciated ascetic for a wood god, fulfilling a vow she made for her son.
That mistake just reinforces the continuous shadow of the divine that's surrounding him, even as he's moving past it.
So, armed with this new sense of balance, he sits under the Bodhi tree. And now comes the ultimate resistance, led by Mara, the Prince of Darkness, who wars specifically with wisdom and the light.
And this confrontation isn't physical. It's a full-scale psychological and philosophical assault on the non-theistic path he's about to discover.
Mara summons his fiends, passions, horrors, ignorances, lusts to stop him. But the real meat of the struggle is philosophical, isn't it? It's focused on the specific weaknesses of the world Siddhartha is trying to save people from.
Absolutely. Let's break down the temptations, because they directly challenge the core tenets of his emerging dharma.
Okay, first up is arati, the sin of self.
Mara urges him to keep the bliss for himself, saying, "It is enough that thou art thou changelessly." This is the temptation of a selfish, individualistic, permanent divine status, the exact opposite of universal compassion.
Then there's Wan Doubt, Visakicha, which hisses that all things are shows, and there is no better way than patient scorn.
Which attacks the validity of the quest for truth itself. It's suggesting that all effort is just meaningless relativism.
And the third temptation is the direct theological assault, the one that ties right back to his critique of Brahm. It's the sorceress of dark creeds, Silabat Paramasa.
Silabat Paramasa is the temptation to cling to useless rules and rituals. She asks if he would dare to put by our sacred books, dethrone our gods, unpeople all the temples. She represents blind faith or adherence to tradition for tradition's sake, regardless of whether it actually alleviates suffering.
So it's the temptation to prioritize the method, the ritual over the verifiable, immediate spiritual truth.
Exactly. And his rejection is a statement of priority. He affirms that what she bids him keep is form which passes, but the free truth stands. He prioritizes impersonal, eternal truth dharma over the transient, ritualistic forms that are tied to temporary deities.
Mara also uses Kama, the king of passions, with visions of beautiful women, arguing that mortal love is the highest heaven. But Siddhartha maintains that this too is just form which passes.
The entire Babel is the final struggle against the ego, the senses, and the limitations of traditional personality-driven religion.
And then in the third watch of the night, he attains Samasambud, perfect enlightenment. The first thing he sees is the line of all his past lives, his karma, confirming that the self is an accumulation of deeds bound by objective consequence.
Then, in the middle watch, he attains Avijna, and he sees system on system, countless worlds and suns. He observes the sheer cosmic scale, and crucially, he notes that the lords of light, the devas themselves, circle obedient round mightier orbs.
This observation is the definitive confirmation of his initial critique. The gods are temporary. They are powerful, yes, but they are like planets in a larger, incomprehensibly vast solar system, and they're orbiting a force that controls them. They are bound and secondary.
And here's the philosophical apex, the ultimate non-theistic conclusion. The force describes Siddhartha seeing a fixed decree at work, which is explicitly past all gods.
Immutable, unspeakable, supreme, a power which builds, unbuilds, and builds again, ruling all things according to the rule of virtue, which is beauty, truth, and use.
This immutable, unspeakable, supreme power is Dharma, the universal objective moral and physical law. It has none to bid, none to forbid. This is the answer to the Brahm dilemma. The universe isn't ruled by a personal capricious will, which would require it to be either bad or weak,
but by an inherent, impersonal, yet perfectly moral and mathematical law.
In the fourth watch, the secret of Saro Dukkha Satya, the first noble truth, is open to him. He understands the chain of cause and effect, the nidanas that leads to suffering. This is the mechanism that keeps the wheel of change turning.
These nidanas are complex terms, but they're essential for understanding the psychological basis of his philosophy. Can you give us a conversational breakdown of this chain of suffering?
Certainly. Siddhartha saw that suffering is not some random curse, but a logical chain of internal causation. It begins with delusion, avidya, which is just fundamental ignorance about reality.
Okay.
Because we're ignorant, we generate perverse tendency, sankhara, our ingrained habits and reactions. This tendency creates energy, vidyan, the consciousness that seeks to establish itself. That consciousness takes local form, namarupa, the body and the mind, which brings sense life, Vendana, our experiences of pleasure and pain.
And all of that sense life culminates in the ultimate problem.
Thirst desire, Trishna. This is the craving for things to be permanent, for pleasure to last, for our self-existence to continue. It's the craving that clings to the false salt waves of pleasures and ambitions. Think of it like a faulty software loop. Ignorance creates habit, which creates consciousness, which creates desire, which generates more action, creating more karma, binding you to the next life.
So the entire system of suffering is internal and self-generated. It's not a punishment dealt out by an angry God, but the natural consequence of delusion and craving.
Which means deliverance must come by tearing out Trishna, starving the senses, so that the total sum of your ended life, your karma, grows pure, ultimately leading to nirvana.
Upon enlightenment, the Buddha speaks his victor's proclamation, and he addresses the true source of our perpetual imprisonment. It's not Brahm, but delusion and desire.
Yes, he addresses the builder of this tabernacle, which is desire and delusion, and he proclaims, I know thee, never shalt thou build again these walls of pain, broken thy houses and the ridgepole split, Delusion fashioned it.
That is the ultimate anti-theistic move. He shifts the blame entirely from a cosmic ruler to individual internal delusion. It makes the individual fully responsible for their own suffering and, crucially, for their own salvation.
And when he teaches his family and the people at Nagara, he lays out this doctrine of self-reliance over prayer with startling clarity.
This teaching just completely dismisses the concept of external spiritual reliance. The imperative voice of the Buddha here is just amazing.
Pray not, the darkness will not brighten. Ask not from the silence, for he cannot speak. Vex not your mournful minds with pious pains. Within yourself, deliverance must be sought. Each a man his prison makes.
Each man his prison makes. That is as radical a statement as you can make in a religious context. It's a complete inversion of traditional piety. He argues against trying to bribe or supplicate the helpless gods by gift and hymn.
The idea of lordship is inverted. Each man has a lordship as great as the loftiest gods, because act maketh joy and woe.
The universe is governed solely by this eternal, sure law dharma that exists before beginning and without an end. This law is the only thing that moves to good, and only its laws endure. It's impersonal, but it's perfectly moral.
And let's just dedicate one more moment to the objective mathematical nature of karma and contrast it sharply with the subjective grace-based nature of theistic forgiveness.
Right. In systems with a personal God, forgiveness is possible. A deity can intervene, grant grace, or accept a sacrifice to wipe the slate clean.
But in the Buddha's model, that is impossible, because the universal law is objective and immutable. What hath been bringeth what shall be. That which ye sow ye reap. It is an unbreakable equation. If you sin, the consequence must be paid.
The equal retribution must be made, though tarry tarry long. The focus shifts entirely from appeasing some external being to self-purification.
He then lays out the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as the practical route to this internal freedom. The Eightfold Path requires internal work. Right purity, right thought, right loneliness, right rapture.
And the path demands the slaying of the 10 sins, which are all internal chains. The love of self, false faith, which is a reference back to Silabat Paramasa, that temptation of empty ritual and doubt.
It contrasts so sharply with paths that emphasize external belief. The Buddha's way requires conquering the aching craze to live itself.
And what about the concept of nirvana? If theistic heavens promise eternal life in the presence of God, nirvana is to find in perfect contrast to both life and death.
The source is so careful here. If any teach nirvana is to cease, say unto such they lie. If any teach nirvana is to live, say unto such they err. It is lifeless, timeless bliss.
It's the ultimate escape from the wheel of change, and therefore the final freedom from the temporary authority of Brahm and the cyclical nature of the devas. It's reaching a state beyond the power of any creator god to grant or revoke.
Which brings us back to the ultimate theological irony, the devas themselves. The sources tell us that the gods themselves envy the achieved brood from their lower seats because karma will no more make new houses for the enlightened one.
That is the single most powerful statement of the supremacy of Dharma, isn't it?
It is. The gods who have achieved bliss and power beyond human imagining are still bound to the system. They are still subject to rebirth and change. Their heavenly time will eventually run out. The Buddha, having achieved nirvana, has stepped outside the entire cosmic architecture, including the hierarchy of deities.
So the gods envy the Buddha not for his power, but for his permanent, irreversible freedom. They're still temporary residents in the mansion of existence. He has found the way to leave the mansion entirely.
Exactly. The closing image seals this anti-egoic final state. The dewdrop slips into the shining sea. The finite desiring self is extinguished, not into nothingness, but into the boundless reality governed by impersonal law, a reality superior to the temporal reign of any personal god.
We have traced a profound philosophical journey. Siddhartha began in a world where gods were central actors, recognizing his divine purpose. But the sheer universality of suffering, that Brahm dilemma, forced him to challenge that system.
His solution was a radical, rationalist paradigm. The recognition of an impersonal, universal moral energy and cosmic order, karma and dharma, that supersedes all personal deities. His path was one of self-rescue, not divine intervention.
And the sources, which are so rich with mythological and spiritual language, paradoxically contain this powerful core of radical rationalism. That critical turning point is the logical critique of the creator. If all-powerful, he leaves it so, he is not good, and if not powerful, he is not God.
That question broke the mold of existing theology, and it led him to seek a power that was immutable, unspeakable, supreme, and critically, past all gods.
This is the revolutionary foundation. The ultimate knowledge he gained was the existence of a law so supreme that even the highest deities, those who once worshipped him, are themselves bound by its mechanism of change and temporary existence.
Which makes Buddhism, in its philosophical core, a path of freedom that is achieved through realizing the self-made nature of reality.
Our deep dive mission was to show you how a philosophy of self-reliance was born from the rejection of the divine. The evidence, drawn directly from the source, is clear. The gods envy the achieved Buddha because they are still subject to the iron arithmetic of karma. So if the highest deities of the traditional world are still bound by this relentless cycle of cause and effect and temporary existence, what does that imply about the nature of true ultimate freedom, and whether salvation must, by definition, be entirely independent of divine personal authority? This is the central question the Buddha asked, and the impersonal universal law he discovered remains his definitive answer. What will you do with the knowledge that your prison or your freedom is entirely within your own making?